ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यम् अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमिड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः. Namaste and welcome to our series of talks on Sunday. This is the 14th in the series. Over this last 3 months, 3.5 months so to say, we have been discussing the various aspects of the human mind and how, or the various models according to the Vedanta philosophy, and how there is something beyond the mind which is our higher self, which is the source of what we really are. So we have in the last 3-4 sessions discussed much about the nature of the Atman, the self. We've said it is eternal, it is immortal, it is infinite knowledge, infinite existence, infinite bliss, infinite purity, beauty, all that we cherish in the most infinite form is or are the attributes of that entity called the Atman, which is our higher self. That Atman, pure consciousness, has become embodied, not only with one body, but with 3 bodies. So the first body is very, very fine. We call it the causal body. In Vedanta, we call it prajna, the body of knowledge. It's like a plastic thin sheet. It lets the light through, but some part is curtailed. Okay, but it's shining. Then the embodied jiva, so to say, puts on another body. This is the mental body. In Vedanta, terminology is called tejasa, that which is luminous. This is the mind, full of ideas and thoughts. And then it puts on the third body, the gross body, the physical body that we are all familiar with. This is called the Vishwa. And this is how we have become embodied, so to say. With each successive embodiment, the inner beauty, purity, goodness of the Atman gets more and more limited, more and more covered. And the process of spirituality is removing these coverings, discovering ourselves, literally, removing these coverings. So, this embodied jiva, we have said, is not in a very high state of existence. The infinite freedom has become curtailed, the infinite knowledge has become limited to various sense knowledge, the infinite bliss of the Atman has become restricted by the various sense enjoyments. The infinite purity and beauty and the holiness of the Atman, the freedom and the peace of the Atman, everything gets curtailed and we are really trapped in this body. When we die, or really when the physical body dies only, the other 2 bodies remain. We are in a state called disembodied. But because the desire to come and enjoy in this physical plane is so strong, as well as the results of our previous karma is so strong that they need to again take another body to work out the results of those karma. So that forces us to be born again. So this return process, when the jiva has understood deep within its own experience after repeated births, various attempts to express that infinite in the finite, to have that infinite life in the finite body, it has never been possible. To experience that infinite peace in the finite body-mind complex, that has not been possible. The infinite knowledge of the Atman is trying to express in sense knowledge, that has not been possible. So after many, many attempts, it becomes wiser, that the attempt to manifest itself while it is good, but the method it is adopting, that's not going to work out. That realization and that turning point is called Vairagya. Disillusionment with the process of trying to manifest the infinite in finite things. And then that embodied soul beats a retreat, so to say, turns around and says, it's not possible in here, so I'm going to go back. That reverse process, reverse return journey is the path of nivritti, going backwards, inwards to one's own self, because it's not possible to manifest the finite, the infinite in finite things, so to say. So in that reverse process, he has to unclothe itself. All the layers, the bodies it has put on, it has to shed off. Not literally by committing suicide or shaking of the body, but by purifying or transforming this body-mind complex so that the inner light of consciousness that is within shines out in greater and greater detail. That is called the process of Chitta Shuddhi, purification of the body-mind complex. And that's what puja is all about. It comes from the word Sanskrit word with the root pu, means that which purifies. So any exercise, whether it's devotional prayers, or karma yoga, or meditation, or jnana yoga, any of those four yogas, when done sincerely, brings about this process of purification of the body and the mind. And as these coverings become more and more transparent, the inner light shines in greater and greater detail, and we say we are growing spiritually. So, we talked about these three bodies. This is one classification of this whole embodiment. There is another one we discussed last time also that talks about the panchakoshas, the five sheaths. Just like an onion has got layer upon layer upon layer, the outermost ones are most gross and the inner ones are subtle. So that physical body which is made out of food, as a product of food, is called Annamaya Kosha, the sheath that's made out of food, the physical body. And inside that, penetrating this and overlapping this also, finer than the gross body, so to say, is the Pranamaya Kosha, that which is the source made of energy, vitality. Finer than that, penetrating all this and overlapping, so you can say layer after layer after layer. The third layer is called Manomaya Kosha, that which is the mind, made of thoughts and ideas. Even finer than that is the sheath of knowledge, Vijnanamaya Kosha. And then beyond that is another one, which is called the Anandamaya Kosha, the sheath of bliss. 5 layers. Beyond that is the Atman, which is bodiless, infinite, of the nature of pure consciousness. And that pure consciousness shines through all these, each layer. So, when our sense of isness, our emness, is identified very strongly with this body, when you say, I am this body, I was born in this year, and I'm so old, I am male or female, or brown or black or white or whatever, that is sort of an ignorance where we are not really telling our true nature, but that which has been superimposed on it. We are talking about the qualities of the body, or any of these 5 layers. That process by which these coverings are removed, or the things that have been superimposed on the Atman are removed, the process of deep superimposition or purification is what spiritual life is all about. How do we bring about that transformation? Well, what is the source of that energy which will empower us to purify ourselves? It will not come from outside. That knowledge or the energy is from that inner Atman itself. So that is where the spiritual seeker tries to tap into that knowledge, that power, which will bring about that purification. It's not like here have the body and we got muddied, and so we want to clean the body, we get an external something like some soap or water that cleanses us from outside. No, this purification really happens from inside, from the subtle towards the gross. And the more we can tap through that, the the more this process of purification will take place. So that is the specialty about spiritual self-purification of this body-mind complex. And the difference between people is really that degree of Chitta Shuddhi. In an incarnation of God, like Sri Ramakrishna, Buddha or Christ, they have this body which is extremely pure, Vishuddha Sattva, high degree of Sattva is there. And the inner beauty, knowledge, purity shines out in all its glory. That same Atman is present in us also. The difference is that we don't have that same degree of purification or purity of the body-mind complex. It's mixed up with Rajas and Tamas, so to say, and the inner light doesn't shine out as much. A little bit of knowledge, little bit of happiness, little bit of existence, little bit of freedom, little feel of joy and purity that we feel. That is only difference in the expression or difference in the degree of manifestation. Shakti, Vishesha. That's the difference only. Not in kind, but in the degree of manifestation. So we are all the same Atman, whether we know or not, but in an ignorant person, that light of Atman is covered. In an enlightened person, that light is shining in all its glory. How do we bring about that transformation so that these coverings are removed and the inner light shines through? So we'll have to work through these 5 sheets, so to say, and make them stronger, purer. We talked about, so this concept of this Atman, the fact of this Atman is now sort of discussed quite in detail. We would like to see how this power, if that is the infinite reservoir of energy and purity and goodness that we all need in our everyday lives, how we can tap more out of that and make our everyday existence more meaningful and purposeful and successful. Then once we are stronger physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, ethically, then the spiritual strengthening, the capacity to rise to the spiritual level takes place. So today's talk and the next few talks that we will have on Sundays will dwell more on the practical application of this Atman principle, the practical Vedanta, how we can tap into that infinite source of power to empower ourselves so that we are successful here and we rise to the next level. Otherwise, we want to climb, but where is the strength that will help us raise ourselves to the next level? So, we discussed in the last class, and we'll revise very quickly, how there is a formula and a process by which we bring about this strengthening. Okay, so we say, let us say there are these 5 levels or 5 dimensions of our being: the physical being, the emotional being, the intellectual being, the moral and ethical being, and the spiritual being. Of the 3, physical and the intellectual and spiritual, we have a fairly good idea how we bring about that process of the strengthening each of those levels. For example, we said that if we wanted to make ourselves physically strong, we will get ourselves enrolled into some gymnasium where there's a person who knows the art and science of doing the right exercises. They'll prepare a particular program for us. We will have to trust that person and his knowledge and take that person to be our guide and follow what that person is going to say. So he will say, make sure you eat well, have good nutritious food. Otherwise, if you come in starving men here in the gymnasium, you would not have that energy to do anything. So that's good nutrition is necessary. And then he says, you have to do regular exercises in a systematic way with a lot of patience and perseverance. And if you do them, then you'll find that from within, the muscles will begin to express themselves. And you can feel them, you can utilize them, you feel stronger in your everyday life. So we have this little formula where I say nutrition for the body plus exercises with patience and perseverance over time brings out or manifests the strength of the physical body. And that most of us We've gone to the gymnasium and done exercises, have known out of our own experience. We talked about intellectual strengthening. And there is this system of education where the food for the mind, which are ideas, nutrition for the mind are the ideas, they are fed systematically according to our capacity to digest them. Just like for a little child, we give them some very soft food like Cerelac or something, and later on as they grow, their capacity to chew food and digest them, then the type of food that's given to them changes. Likewise, in the education system, the teachers will teach mathematics from class 1, year 1 to year 12, but they will grade it systematically so that the students can build their capacity or mental strength to assimilate, understand those teachings as they grow. So, the information or the knowledge is fed into the students, and it's not only just putting in the information there, it is about the capacity to process them. So the teachers will teach something, then they'll give some problems or exercises we call. They have these books called exercise books where they solve the problems. See, the word exercise comes there also. And after some time, the particular student will develop that capacity to understand the complex subject matter and solve those problems. And later on, they will apply that. Maybe most of the things we learn in terms of information that we gather in our school, right from year 1 to university, 95% of it we never use those things in our everyday life. So what's the utility of those education systems of going to schools and universities? The utility is that our intellect and the mind gets trained to take complex ideas, break them into smaller components, understand them, work around them, and then reassemble them and form solutions. Yeah. And so this capacity of assimilating ideas is what is the training is given in an education system. Those who are a little bit more educated or who know about what is called the pedagogy or the science of education would be knowing this what is called Bloom's Taxonomy of Cognitive Development. What it says that talks about the process of assimilation of ideas. And why is that important? And I would like to discuss a little bit of that here. Swami Vivekananda said that true education is about assimilation of ideas. If one has assimilated 5 ideas, that particular person has more education compared to somebody who has mucked up a whole library with information. Now all that is available on internet and all that. And what it says is the mind should be trained, or the intellect should be trained to process the information through 6 steps successively. The first one is called information, second is called understanding, third is called application, fourth is called analysis, fifth is called synthesis, sixth is called feedback. And a good teacher will use those various exercises in the book to challenge the student so that they develop these capacities of taking in the information, understanding that information, applying that. It could be writing an application or doing a little experiment in the laboratory and all that, and then developing these higher skills, which are the more important ones of analysis. Analysis is to break up a complex idea into its parts. Okay. And synthesis is the reverse of it, those parts to be recomposed into the whole again. But how well that composition has taken place, we judge that through a process of feedback. So for example, a good mechanic will take a whole engine apart, and he looks at each part and analyzes which one is still good, which is torn out, which has to be replaced. And he puts it all back together and starts the engine, and then listens to the engine and says, is it sounding all right? Everything is finely tuned or not? So that's the last part of feedback, where he's trying to understand, is it functioning as it should be? Now, these 3 stages of analysis, synthesis, and feedback is not really mostly taught in a very systematic way in our education system. A good teacher, a good education system should do that. So here we got to make we have got this to make ourselves intellectually strong, a very strong intellect which will take a very complicated situation, problem that is there, and not panic. It knows the art of breaking it into smaller components, just like we take food, but we chew it, we go through the process of digestion, and it break it by putting chemicals and enzymes and all that. It comes down to amino acids and sugars and salts and vitamins and all that. Then the body absorbs it into the bloodstream, and there it does what is called a synthesis process. Assimilation is there, where it composes the human muscle and tissue and bones and hair and all those type of things. How that which was in plant, nutrients, is taken into the body, the essential parts, and made into a body tissue. That is synthesis. And if it is burnt into in the mitochondria of the cell and releases energy, then we have made good use of that whole process of eating. So likewise, ideas are food for the mind. If we can take those ideas, information, understand them, apply them, analyze them, break into parts, synthesize them, make it into our own knowledge, skills or skill sets, and then use them to solve our everyday problems, then that whole process of education is there. We'll come back to another definition of education, very interestingly, afterwards, where Swami Vivekananda gives two definitions of education. One, he says, education is the manifestation of perfection already in men. And the second one, he says, the training by which the current and expression of the will is controlled and made fruitful is called education. A very deep but very meaningful definition. But let's jump over this to the third level, or the final level, the spiritual dimension of our being, how that too over the time has been developed into a very systematic process by which we strengthen ourselves spiritually. So at that level, what do we have? We have the food for the soul, so to say, which are spiritual ideas. The Paravidya, realizations of saints and sages who have transformed their mind, purified their mind, and they could access those subtler dimensions of reality, and then they reported that back through various recordings in the scriptures, so through imageries and stories and fables and parables and all that, so that we get a glimpse of something there, and then we aspire to also have that experience ourselves. So those teachings form our scriptures, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, the Tripitakas. These are the food for the soul, so to say, which we gather through reading or satsang or spiritual discourses. But that exercises also have to be done in the spiritual level also. So the spiritual disciplines of karma yoga, or bhakti yoga, puja and all that, meditation, japa, repetition of the mantra, these are the exercises by which we strengthen ourselves or strengthen our spiritual dimension of our being, so to say. We said that the other two dimensions that are there are very important, the moral and the ethical aspect of our being, as well as the emotional aspect of our being. And most people would agree that really there is no systematic process of training in our society, in our education system, where one becomes stronger, so to say, emotionally. There might be some ideas and value education and guidelines in the scriptures about moral and value education, but just having the information about them is one thing, but assimilating those ideas and putting them into practice is another thing. Do we have an equivalent system of education for emotional growth and development just as we have for the intellectual growth? Most people will say, no, there is no such training. And that is probably one of the reasons why we are sometimes very, very emotionally weak. Small things upset us and we do not know how to manage ourselves and those emotions and come to grief because of that lack of training. We'll come back to that, but what I would like you to keep in mind is this one little formula we have here. that to strengthen a particular dimension of our being, we have to nourish that particular dimension. Nutrition, of so to say, has to be there, and then we have to exercise those particular dimension of our being, and then through that combined process over time, sustained over time, that particular dimension of our personality being becomes stronger to manage and handle and be insulated from the external changes that's happening in our environment. That means we are protected and strong and not get infected by the environment, the changes in the environment. But let us, before I go into that, I would like to talk about this intellectual strengthening process, because the current education system is more about gathering so much information, putting in together. That process of really processing that is not there. And we have got an abundance and bombardment of information that is coming through so many sources, through internet and everywhere. People are not really given that training by which they can process that into knowledge, and how that knowledge and experience can be processed into wisdom. So we've got a lot of information, but we probably don't know so much. We're not so wise, so to say. That training is not given there. So Swamiji says, education is the manifestation. That means something is already there, we have to bring it out. Okay, so knowledge is not in the books, it's not in the teachers. The books and the teachers help us bring something out within us. Our minds are not an empty bucket which we can fill with water, but it's like a spring. And some stones and rocks are blocking the flow of the water outside. The task of the teacher is to remove those blockages and the water gushes out. That is how we can understand that. If something can ignite that and bring about that expression. So it's a manifestation of perfection already in man. It's already there. It's not that it has to be brought from outside, but it is not manifested fully. The process of education removes those coverings, and the light of knowledge, that is the nature of the Atman, shines more and more and more. If our teachers and education planners and curriculum designers understood this principle and incorporated into the principles of philosophy of education, then the approach of the education and the teachers would be so much different than just putting so many information into the heads of the children and ask them to reproduce during an examination, and then we pass them and say, yes, you know. Really, that is not how education is about in the Vedantic sense. But Swami Vivekananda gives another beautiful definition, and I would like you to a more practical definition. He says, the training by which the current and expression of the will is brought under control and made fruitful is education, equals to education. So let's explore this particular statement in a little bit more detail. First of all, it's a training. And training means doing something repeatedly, just like a football, you get rugby training, football training, anything, you do it once or twice until every time you do something through an action, it leaves an impression in the mind. It's called the Samskaras. So, that which is an action consciously done, for example, in the beginning you are learning to do some typewriting or driving. Okay, so on the first day you sit in the car, you are very alert, holding on the steering wheel and the gear, and all your eyes and ears are wide open, and you are totally focused on that process of driving. But if you keep on doing that again and again, part of that becomes sort of impressed into the mind, and it goes into the subconscious level, and 1 year down the line when you're driving, you're not all that alert and stiff and alert. We are having a nice conversation, talking and this and that, but the driving is going so nicely and smoothly. That has become part of our nature, into the habit system. How did it happen? We kept on doing it again and again and again until it became our nature, so to say, became part of our character, so to say. So every thought, word or deed leaves an impression. And if we do something in a repeated way, every new addition of the impression strengthens that until it becomes our character or nature. That means our mind naturally flows into these new ruts that have been created in the chitta or the mind stuff, so to say. And it becomes very much automatic, so to say, almost involuntary. We are just doing it very, very naturally and spontaneously, whether it's dancing or playing football or anything. By repeatedly doing something, we develop our mind, and our body system tunes itself to do it almost unconsciously. So it's a form of training. That means we have to do. Remind, it's about the exercises in the gymnasium. Here's this training part of it. Actually, the word education comes out of the word, of a Latin word educatus, which means to train or to bring out. That's a root word, a source of the word education. So the training by which, so it's a means to an end, by which the current and expression of the will is brought under control and made fruitful. This is very interesting. There's a new idea has been introduced, the will of man. So what is this will? Of course, if you want to, we use this very much in our everyday English. You say, I will do this, I will get up, I will eat food, I will do this. There's a will is there. It is like a little force or direction to the energy that is within us. So the human body and the mind is a bundle of energy, but that energy is trying to seek an expression. And the direction in which it will engage, the arrow is that will, so to say. So you say, I will do this. That is the line of action, my thought process or my physical activity is there. So if we think about our everyday life, from the moment we get up to the time we go to sleep, whether we speak or not consciously, whether talking to ourselves or telling to somebody else, there is this little sentence we construct, I will do this now, I will do this now, I will do this now. Throughout the day, I am doing little things, I will do this, and some of them you work out, most of them you work out, some of them you might change your mind, but I will do this. Now, in the definition, the training by which the current and expression of will. So let's expand that idea of what is a current of will, so to say. When we talk about an electric current or a water current, it means electrons flowing one after the other in the same direction. There are electrons in a piece of metal, but if they're in a sea, a sea of electrons, as they say in a metal, if you apply a potential difference, then that potential difference forces the electrons to flow from a higher potential to a lower potential. Same thing in a water current or air current, where something flows in the same direction because there's a potential difference. That flow is called a current. Right? So if we understand what is the current of will, visualize these little wills that we are having throughout the day to be like something like this water particles or these electrons. And we are trying to make them flow in the same direction because we have set up a overall goal which will take us, and this expression of these wills are culminating towards that. It could be a big goal. It could be like you say, I will become a doctor, or I will become an engineer. Then that we have to hold on to that will for a period of 5 or 6 years. In between we will do so many things, but the underlying current is that all my thoughts, words and deeds, I'm going to the university, I'm doing all these practicals and writing examinations, is directed to that one goal of I will become a doctor. So it could be a very sustained thing, or it could be just simple thing like, I'm going to have a lunch, or that could be a very short period. Yet it is again that will. So there's a current of will. And because it is a work, an activity, energy is flowing, it will have a result. And that result is the expression, the outcome of that. So at the end of the day, did you reach that goal that was set for in your initial sankalpa or the initial idea? Ichha Shakti is called. So here we have we are exploring the various parts of this definition of education Swamiji has given. He says it's a form of training. What will do that training do? It will set up a current of will. It will train us so that we can maintain that current, so that when some obstacles come, some resistance comes, some difficulty comes, then the electrons are not say, I'm not going to go through. They will still go through. They might hit the piece of metal. Just like in a metal, there's resistance to the flow of electrons. In a pipe, there's resistance to the flow of water. But if the force behind is strong, the potential difference is strong enough, then the electrons will flow in spite of the resistance and cross. And maybe that's the whole purpose of it, so that it generates the heat, and that's what happens in a electric filament of a light bulb. You want that heat that glows, that it comes out as light. So the training by which the current and expression of will is brought under control. So it can be a current, but without any control. Okay, so a chain reaction can happen, just like in a atomic reaction in an atom bomb or nuclear reaction. One atom splits up and then it triggers the next one. But if it's an uncontrolled one, then it becomes an atomic bomb. But when it is controlled, then it is utilized in a nuclear power station, and you are controlling that energy. That energy then heats steam into water, water into steam, high pressure steam, and that turns a turbine, and electrical energy is generated, and that's what happens in a nuclear power station. So it's a very controlled reaction, so to say. That's what happens in a nuclear power station. Likewise, this will of man that we have, if it's nice and controlled and kept targeted to the outcome that we want, whatever we want to achieve, then it becomes fruitful. But if it is not controlled, that means today I say I'm going to do this, and I do that for a while, and some little bit of difficulties come, or something else attracts my attention, and then I drop that and say I will do that. And like this, it doesn't form a current of will. It doesn't become fruitful. All that energy becomes dissipated, so to say. So, Swami Vivekananda says, real education is that training by which this current and expression of will in all of us, because we all are living beings, and every moment we say, I will do this, I will do that type of thing. If that can be all aligned to one ultimate goal, so to say, in life. It can be short-term goals, like 1 hour something I want to do, or this week I'm going to do something, or over a period of 5 years I'm going to do something, or it could be a lifelong goal, like I want to realize the truth. And it's just not something that's done overnight, but it's a long journey. Yet every thought, word and deed is now oriented towards that goal. This is education in its broadest sense. Any education system that can train us to develop this capacity would have really given us that education which we can apply in our everyday life. Now, it doesn't have to be happening in a classroom with a teacher where we're all dressed up in school uniform. Life itself is a great education, field of education, where you find that there is always an opportunity to bring about the training, provided we are mindful that that is the purpose of every experience that we're having. Otherwise, as soon as some difficulties come, you're trying to do something and there's some obstacle, and then we want to step back and say, there's a problem, how we can navigate around it, sidestep it, or get somebody else to do it, or run away from it. What happens is that we do not develop that strength because we have skipped that exercise. We need that exercise to develop that internal strength, because exercise brings out that strength. Otherwise, it's potentially there. That friction, going against the nature, is important. You see, the natural force of gravity pulls the weight down, but we utilize that to fight against the force of gravity, and that brings up the muscles in our biceps, so to say. In the gymnasium, we do that in a systematic way. We stimulate an environment. We try to give a wrong signal to the body that I need this strength by lifting so many pieces of weight, and the body says, okay, I must respond by developing more muscles, and suddenly you see after some time this muscles begins to bulge out. But do you need to go to the gymnasium to do that? Or you can become strong Many people are there who are working in the farms and all that. They don't go to the gymnasium to make them strong. It's just the everyday work that they're doing. It itself forms the exercise for us. So in that sense, Swami Vivekananda says that this world is a gymnasium where we come to do exercises to make ourselves spiritually strong. And if we look at this whole life experience in this world in that light, then and the goal is to make ourselves strong. That is the real purpose, not that we are going to only have a nice time and be happy, because going to the gymnasium is not a very happy and pleasant experience. You get pretty painful at the end of the day. You're always trying to push, but we are not going there to have a nice, pleasant time. We are going there to sweat out and feel that pain and push ourselves a little bit more, because we are interested in the strength that's coming in or not. So if we had that approach and attitude towards the challenges that life will throw at us, then we'll find that everywhere and anywhere there's so many exercise machines are lying around there, so to say. And in that sense, you'll find that even for the moral and ethical strengthening of ourselves and the emotional strengthening of ourselves, there's plenty of exercises everywhere, provided we have our eyes open to identify those opportunities and turn them to our advantage. So when we have this understanding, it's going to be exercises, it's going to be a little painful, we should not run away from them, rather we should embrace them. In the beginning, it will be a little painful, but by the sheer effort of facing them and not running away from them, that power will awaken within us, and after some time, that which was painful in the beginning is no longer so painful anymore. Just like, the first time we went to the gymnasium, we lifted 10 kg weights 50 times or 30 times, and the body was all very sore. But you continue doing that, and after 1 month, you can lift that same weight and go through that same series of exercises, and you don't feel that pain because the strength has come in. We are interested in that strength. Strength is life. Weakness is death. When we are strong, then fear and everything goes away. When we are weak, then we are afraid of everything. Whether it's the immunity against external bacteria or virus that can, make us sick, or it is the immunity and strength against the outside forces that can come from people that can unsettle us and, disturb us. It's all about strength and weakness. Swamiji says, if there is any sin, it is weakness. It's ignorance. Ignorance of our true nature. That's why we are not knowing that the power is within us. And secondly, we have not tried to manifest that power. And that's why, deprived of that infinite potentiality that is within us, we are miserable and suffering. The method of Vedanta is first to educate ourselves of our true nature, and then second, to go through these various exercises to manifest that power. And you see, the Bhagavad Gita is about that. Sri Krishna is highly accomplished in all science of warfare, but he doesn't have that knowledge of the Atman. So when these challenges come in his life before the battle of life, that knowledge is found to be wanting. And Sri Krishna, so he's a depressed man, worried, confused and all that. That's how we can look at him. And look at Sri Krishna as a wonderful psychiatrist who has sussed him out immediately, and he says, okay, your knowledge is not very, very complete. I'm going to top that up with the idea of the Atman and all that, and its immortal nature is the source of all that you need. And then I'm going to teach you the art of fighting your way. Continue doing this, because you need, this is your battlefield, this is your gymnasium, this is your exercise where you will test yourself, and that process will bring out and awaken that Atman nature in you. So you don't have to run away into the forest, because you need that exercise. But now grounded in the Atman nature. Therefore, he says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, that means at all times, Mam anusmara, think of me. Me means not the personality of Sri Krishna, Vasudeva Putra, but the Atman that is inside all of us. And Yuddha cha, keep your mind anchored in your Atman nature and its wonderful potentiality, and fight. Fight means engage yourself in your duties. We don't fight the same battlefield warfare Arjuna did, but everyone has got his own little battles. But we are encouraged to fight this, go through this exercise, so to say, not very pleasant, but having faith in that infinite possibility of the Atman, that exercise will bring it out. We need that exercise. That is very, very important. Unless we reconcile ourselves to that or seek that out, like, you don't go to the gymnasium, or no one is forcing you to go to the gymnasium. We seek that out. It's a painful experience. In the morning you get up and you go and sweat out, and maybe the whole day the body is painful and so. But and the second day you go, and the third day you go. It's not a very pleasant exercise, but you are really so to say, ready to pay for that pain because it will give the strength. What we want is that strength, but that experience of repeatedly doing that thing, exercises, is what brings out the strength within us. Swamiji says also, like, a piece of timber has got fire and light, but just by saying that there's light and there's fire, heat in that piece of timber, it's not going to bring it out. We have to do that exercise. And what's that exercise? It's about friction, rubbing that and heating. It's not a very pleasant exercise, and if you do it sufficiently long enough with great intensity, then some magic will happen, a spark will come, it will smoke, and before you know it lights up, and suddenly it dispels the darkness that's around, dispels the cold that is around. That is a good use of that piece of timber. If it's not utilized in that way, it might lie there for so many years and rot out. Has not lived the real purpose of what that piece of timber is all about. Likewise, human life is also like that. It's all about going through this exercise, igniting the fire, so to say, in us, manifesting that light of knowledge and strength and beauty and purity and goodness. And if we can do that, in the end of the day, that piece of timber will become converted into charcoal. That's all right. But it's shown out in that beautiful light and gave out that beautiful heat. And that's what life is all about. We just don't want to keep it all nice and good. We want to work it out, and the fulfillment of that piece of timber is to bring out that light and heat, so to say. The fulfillment of human life is to bring out that light of spiritual knowledge, the heat, what is called the tapasya. Heat comes from the word tapa. So that's what human life is about. It might be a short life. Swami Vivekananda lived less than 40 years, yet the light he brought to this world shone and still guides and inspires many people. Buddha, Christ, Acharya Shankara, they lived very, very short lifetimes, but what a light amount of spiritual knowledge and light they brought out to the whole world. That is the power, that is potential in every human being. But we have to understand that the process is not to live a nice, comfortable, goody-goody life. It is about living a life of intensity where that inner fire and power can be manifested. Education is a training by which the current and expression of will is brought under control and made fruitful. Fruitful here would be setting up to the highest goal, the highest ideal. A goal is not to have a pleasant enjoyment. The goal is knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And with that, if we lock our GPS system, so to say, in this journey of life onto that ultimate goal of self-realization, then all our thoughts, words, and deeds become aligned, and little wills all line up in that direction, and over time it forms a powerful current, and it takes us across to that destination. It becomes fruitful. It might take us part of the journey, but then when we die, or the physical body dies, the mental body or the subtle body, they don't die. So that impetus and the energy and the samskaras, all those things are still contained there. And the next moment, next time when you take another physical body, they seek out expression, and the journey continues. Just like when you're traveling a long journey, at the end of the day, you stop somewhere and go to sleep. And the next morning you get up and again carry on. Death is like going to sleep, except overnight you change the whole body. You wake up in the morning, you've got a new vehicle to run on, and that takes us further and further until we reach that ultimate goal that is within us. Now, it's important, the gist of an important point of this today's talk is that we have to deeply understand and develop this conviction that this world is a gymnasium. It has a utility. It's not a nice place to be happy. Happiness is really inside, not out here at that physical level. Here is a very limited experience, little joy you are experiencing. So we should not try to be happy here in the sense of happy birthday, happy new year, and all those type of things. It's nice to wish people that. At the same time, you should know that in this dualistic world, happiness and misery, life and death, day and night, success and failure, victory and defeat, the pendulum will swing here. You cannot just have it in one corner and say happy, 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 like that. But the other swing, when it goes to the opposite side, that is mostly a beta teacher. That is what wakes us up and impels us to rise higher. And that is beautifully illustrated in one of the teachings in the Upanishads, where in the Mundaka Upanishad, there's this little story of two birds on a tree, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakhaya. Those who have read the Upanishad would know this, but for others, so imagine there's this tree, and on this tree there is a bird sitting right on top, and there's another one on the lower branches. The one on the top is perfectly still, sitting quiet, content in its own blissful self, expressing, radiating that effulgence of light and contentment and all that. No activity is necessary, abiding in its own true nature somehow. The one that is in the lower branches is a very active bird. It is jumping here and there, and on the tree there are so many fruits there. It's looking for the nice ripe ones, the sweet ones, and eating them and enjoying them, and now and then, in mistake, it bites onto an unripe one, which is extremely bitter. And when it bites that bitter fruit, then it suddenly gets a shock, and he looks up and he sees the other bird on top and says, wow, that one is so beautiful and joyful and peaceful, and it somehow becomes a little attracted and jumps one or two branches up, and then again it forgets about the bird on top and gets busy with eating these fruits around here. And again, once in a while, it will hit upon a very bitter fruit, and that bitter fruit will make it think and look up at the other bird, and again it will jump up one or two branches. In this, every time it eats a bitter fruit, a painful experience comes to the bird. It looks up and compares itself, its miserable state, to the blissful, joyful state of the bird on top, and attracted by that ideal, it makes a little effort to rise higher. And as it keeps coming closer and closer, ultimately it comes so close and it finds that it itself was only a shadow, a reflection of the bird on top. And by that time it is so close that it merges into the bird. Through this little story or analogy, the bird on top is the Paramatman, our higher self. The bird on the lower branches is the Jivatman, the embodied bird, the Jiva, which is ignorant of its true nature. It thinks I am different from that bird on top. And it also thinks that the purpose or the experience, desired experience, is to live at this level, enjoy the nice fruit, so to say. So we're always looking for happy and good experiences. But if life were so, if we only had those sweet fruits all the time, and we lived there and died there, so to say, and never made any attempt to rise and did not make any progress, then that, from the ultimate purpose of life point of view, that the purpose is to realize ourselves as one with the bird on top, or the Jivatma is one other with the Paramatman, then all these happy things, successful things, have really not been our blessing, because they have not led us to any higher spiritual growth or enlightenment. On the other hand, if one's life was challenging and difficult and we had a lot of bitter experiences, and each one of those bitter experiences forced us to rise a little higher, then these painful experiences, the bitter experiences, have been the great teachers, really. And they are the ones which have really been spiritually conducive to our spiritual growth. Having understood this, if we ask somebody, now which one would you prefer in life from now on, if that understanding is there, then a more enlightened person would say, Okay, I'm not going to only seek for beautiful fruits in my life anymore. Any happiness. I will welcome sufferings, the bitter fruits, so to say, when they come, knowing that they will wake this soul up and encourage us or push us a little higher, disillusioned us from this world that happiness is here. Really, it's not there. It's the nature of the Atman, the bliss of the Atman really that shines through. And the closer we are to our true self, the more that Atman nature will express itself in the form of knowledge, beauty, purity, and goodness. And the purpose of life is to guide us, push us, whack us, whatever way, so to say, towards that ultimate goal where we realize our oneness with that Supreme Being. So we'll come back to the same philosophy and theme when we talk about strengthening and empowering ourselves in the emotional development of emotional strength. So what are the emotions? I would like you to think a little bit about it before we discuss this in more in detail. We will discuss some principles here, the applications each one of us has to work out in our own situation, vocation, workplace, family. So the principles are that there is something called the intellect of man, which we associate with the head. There is something called the heart of a person, which is the seat of all emotions. In that, there are some very noble, uplifting emotions like love and kindness and compassion and sacrifice and, charity and giving and all that, which makes us feel good about ourselves and gives meaning and purpose to life. And then there are also these negative emotions like anger and hatred and jealousy and greed and lust, which sort of disempowers us and makes us feel small and miserable and all those things. So these two possibilities are there. Certain things drag us down, certain things can uplift us. And how we can have that strength to say no to this the disempowering sort of say emotions which covers the nature of the Atman and obstructs the flow of that bliss, so to say. And how we can promote and practice and exercise ourselves that this ennobling emotions of kindness, compassion, charity, and serving other people, sacrifice and all those things, they are put into practice, and that practice brings about that purification of the heart so that Atman nature shines through. That is why Swamiji says, if the whole Bible was lost, but only one sentence was remembered, mankind still will be saved. What was that sentence? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This purification of the heart, the purification of the mind, chitta shuddhi, whatever we call, that is the means by which the Atman nature will be discovered and man will realize his oneness or identity with the Supreme Being. How do we do this systematically? How would a parent who has brought a child into this world and understands that the duty is not only to give them food and some education, but sending them to some kindergarten or putting them in chair of some child care center or sometimes send them out, have they discharged their duty as a parent? Or the duty is beyond giving some food and clothing and shelter, but giving that wonderful environment where these wonderful sentiments, the noble sentiments of kindness, compassion, charity, sacrifice, love, affection, and all those type of things will grow, and that child will feel that joy, and it becomes a habit, so that in life he doesn't think that, oh, I have to be kind. Kindliness becomes the very nature of that person. On the other hand, if that is not done, and that those channels are blocked, then the negative energy channels can open, and you'll find them they're very bitter and cynical and critical, and you have these negative emotions, and they do not know how to manage these things, anger and hatred and jealousy and greed, and you'll find there's so much of it in this world. Where did we fail? The child didn't have much say in the quality of education or training in this field in their life. The education system, the parents, people around in the early formative years, they were responsible for that. But if they themselves are not educated about these things, then we bring out people, send them out in the world who are themselves miserable and make others miserable also. So there has to be some systematic training. Can we work out a process where a mother and a father know that this is the responsibility and duty, and they set up the environment around the house, and they do various activities with the kid, and it is a family becomes a unit where all these wonderful sentiments are cultivated, and they love that beautiful protected environment of a family that spreads out to the extended family, to the community, to the nation, and across to humanity. If it can be done in a systematic way and becomes ingrained into the human nature, we have produced some very good human beings. So it will not happen randomly. Now and then, yes, people bring good samskaras from the previous lifetime, but just like we have institutions through which systematic education is provided for the intellectual development of our intellect, likewise, we can design systems by which we can help ourselves. And when we say children, it doesn't mean child in age. We might be children in terms of spiritual age. We still require that type of training and education of our emotional or the heart, so to say. We will discuss this in next Sunday's class. In the meantime, I would like you to think about that, because you are all in different situations. In your own gymnasium, how are you going to put into practice? We'll be discussing some ideas where I will use a little bit of science and all that. So for those who are interested to go deeper into Vedanta and its application in a more scientific way, so to say, I have a book that I am reading and I would like to recommend this. It is by this author Isaac Bentov, Bentov. It's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum on the Mechanics of Consciousness. We are talking about consciousness, we call it the Atman or the Self. How in a very scientific way we can understand or have some models and templates by which we can understand what is taught in very abstract spiritual language. These ideas can help us understand, have a very logical understanding of this concept of consciousness and how we can incorporate it in our everyday life. So you can buy them online, soft copies, or you can buy some paperback edition. It's worth reading. I'm reading it for the second time. So we'll see you next Sunday. Plus think on that equations, nutrition plus exercise is strength. We have talked about the physical level, the intellectual level, and the spiritual. We'll go deeper into the emotional development, emotional strengthening, by which this same formula of nutrition and exercise over time can bring about strengthening of the emotional dimension of our personality. Until then, keep safe. We'll meet you next Sunday. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.